Hi everybody, today is Sunday before Memorial Day, and we got to go do some work at the Trainer Cemetery in Town. And Granny got, every year at Memorial Day we kind of get mushy about our history.
I'm always mushy about our history.
She's always mushy about her history, but I only get mushy during Memorial Day because we have some heroes in our family, and I mean heroes. So I don't know, I get strung out about, I don't know.
He'll be balling for the day's over.
Yeah.
He'll be balling for the day's over. That's how it goes.
I love my family. All right, here we go. So we're at the Deer Creek Baptist Church. This is our first stop.
And this grave is Homer Hull Carter.
And this is our oldest one in America that, what did you say now?
No, his, we trace that Carter line, which I was a Carter, it's the maiden name. We trace the Carter line way back into England. We're English people. But his dad came here, Mason Carter was his father. And Mason Carter was fought in the War of 1812. He was, as military records are, he was slightly wounded in the Battle of Tippecanoe. Okay. And he had and he was, after that, then he tended the wounded. And his horse got paid more than he did. I've always thought that was funny, but I guess the horse ate more. But he was in the service for like 3 months. It was a pretty simple skirmish, you know. And anyhow, he came back to, he was in Spencer County in like the late 1700s. And then he wound up in Perry County, real close to here. And I think like the 1817 census shows him here. He was married twice. He married I believe a DeWitt the first time and an Artman the second time, or vice versa. I'd have to look at the papers and see. But his second wife was a niece of his first wife. And this guy came from his second marriage. And
okay, so this is his son.
Yes, this is the son of Mason Carter. Mason Carter was the oldest one. The first one that came to Perry County in the Carter line was Mason. And that's Weltha, that's Homer's wife. And on the other side is Homer's if you go to the other side of the stone. I have their picture hanging up in my house, a painted picture of them. She was beautiful. They had 13 kids. And I think Homer, the second marriage of Mason Carter, Homer's dad, Homer came in, I think they had 6 kids, I'd have to look and see, and Homer was like child number 4. But when he was 18, let me back up, 14 I believe, his dad died of hog cholera. Hog cholera. And then whenever he was, a lot of them pioneers died with what they called hog cholera. And then when he was 18, his mother died. So by the time he was 18, he was pretty well an orphan.
Wow.
He got married. He married Weltha.
And then what
Rowley.
time of year, what time was this? This has been in the 1850s?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, 1849 is whenever Mason Carter, his father, died. And about 4 years later, then his mother died. And both of them died of hog cholera. A lot of these old people died with what they called hog cholera. I don't know, you know, we're into a thing now that was transferred from an animal to people, and I don't know if that's the case. I never did look it up, but it's probably the same case with hog cholera. I don't know.
Okay.
But he had 4 kids and finally got inducted into the service for the Civil War. And he was older at first. They thought too old to serve, but as the war went on, so many people were gone that they just kept
climbing,
drafting, climbing. So finally he had to go into the service, and he fought with General Sherman on what they called his March to the Sea, you know. Okay. And after that he continued to be in the service with Sherman for a while until surrender and the war was over, and they went back to Washington D.C. and then traveled to Louisville, and he mustered out in Louisville, Kentucky. And he came back to the farm, but wound up going to Missouri and working somewhere along his life. He worked in Missouri, I guess on a farm or something, for about a year. And while he was in Missouri, he actually knew the James boys. They were younger then. They were boys growing up, but he knew them, and he was always pretty proud of that.
The fact he knew the James boys.
Yeah, between that and him being involved in Sherman's March to the Sea, that's probably the neatest thing about him. But he lived to be, I believe, I have to figure it out, 95. And they called him Uncle Hole. And like I say, they had 13 kids. And whenever his wife died. She died a few years before him. All 13 of those kids were still alive.
Well,
And-
say 80.
Okay.
Say 80 years. It's 1835 to 1915. That'd be 80 years.
So she was 80 years old when she died in 19.
Oh, she died. Okay.
She died.
What's it? What's
She
his?
died in
Okay.
1915. He lived on to 1930. He lived 15 years after she died.
Oh yeah, 95. Okay.
Yeah. But when she died, all 13 kids was still alive. And back then there was so many sicknesses and stuff that was pretty unusual. They made a note of it in her obituary.
That all her 13 kids
all
are still
13
alive.
kids was still alive at her funeral. But I have pictures. I have a lot of pictures of him. They took pictures of him and his kids and the old house in the background, and they moved that house down to Shubal Little Village, and his home is preserved down there, a thing that I'm forever grateful to him for.
Wow.
But that's kind of the story of Homer Hull Carter. And we'll go next to...
Now what's he to Pawpaw? Grandpa?
He would be Papa's great-grandfather.
Wow. Okay, so we're starting pretty far back.
He'd be
Okay.
my great-great, and he'd be your three-great-grandfather.
So that's my three great-grandfather.
Yep.
Huh.
And his oldest son, his first child, was Alonzo, and he's buried here in the cemetery. We'll look him up in a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so what we found out now is Joni don't know shapes. She needs to take...
I said square and it's a rectangle. I don't know what to tell you.
It's a square tangle.
Isn't
The
a
square tangle.
Okay, this is Alonzo Carter. Alonzo is the son of Homer Hull, which grave we were just at. Alonzo fought in the Spanish-American War.
Okay.
He was the oldest son of that guy.
Okay.
And his son, him and Caroline was a hempill. Okay. And Edgar Carter used to tell me stories about
Wait a
some of-
minute. That's something don't make sense.
Okay.
1943.
That's when he died.
Your generation off.
No.
1856. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm okay. Screwed up. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Math never was your strong
Yeah.
point.
No.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Caroline was a hempill. And
Okay.
anyhow, Edgar Carter, my cousin, he's gone now, but he used to tell me stories on the hemphills. And he said one of the hemphills, I believe it was Bill, came to stay with, of course, these were his grandparents. He said
Okay.
came to stay with Grandma and Grandpa, and two of the boys, Uncle Otis, and I believe, I forgot who the other one was, but two of the boys didn't like him. So they snuck gunpowder in his pipe. And when he lit his pipe up, the gunpowder went off. And it didn't hurt him, but he wanted to whip him so bad, and anyhow Alonzo wouldn't let him. And then another one of the hemphills was Edgar said some kind of a police officer, and he was breaking up a skirmish in Cannleton, and he actually kicked a guy in the tailbone and broke his tailbone, and that wound up getting infected, and that guy died.
Oh man.
And that's about what I know about them. Alonzo was a pretty progressive guy. He was justice of the peace for years. You know, they had him scattered around in the country back then because nobody could travel very well. You know, it was all on horses. So he was a justice of the peace, and he kept the post office for a while. And he also ran the local telephone company for a while. You know, back then they kind of it was a communal thing, you know, and he kept the switchboard. And Dad talked about being down there and then making the cross members with the little spikes in them, you know, that the big the big glass insulators went over, you know.
Oh yeah.
So they had to keep all the lines up, and when somebody didn't pay their bill, they got disconnected. So I have an Uncle Martin, which we got all kinds of stories about him after a while. One of Alonzo's boys that never got married. He was a construction worker. He was a case. Anyhow, he didn't care about anything, so Alonzo would send him out to disconnect people when they didn't pay the bills. But Alonzo and Caroline, my Aunt Marcia Ruth told me one time that Caroline thought more of a little dog she had than she ever did her. So I think she was kind of a stern woman.
Okay.
But Dad told me Alonzo, he can remember when he was a small kid and staying up there, Alonzo used to sing to him. So he said, I think Alonzo kind of enjoyed having me around. But they weren't real friendly, outgoing people, but they were good people. They worked hard, you know, and they done things for the community. And so that's the story of that generation. That's
Kind of reserved.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be generation number 3 in Perry County, and generation number 2 that we visited. Alonzo.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Give me some flowers.
All right. Going at it.
I like these blue roses. Okay, Evan Carter was my grandpa. He died when I was 8 years old. He was the son of Alonzo, who was the son of Homer Hull. And we are now at a different cemetery. We're at the Lilydale Cemetery right now. Evan was, I believe, the baby in that family. He was the youngest, I'm pretty sure, in Alonzo's family. I have tons and tons of pictures of him. He was a great guy. Knew how to have a good time. He was kind of a partier. Now, his father, Alonzo, was the same way. Him and the boys actually got together and built a dance hall atop a granary they had on their farm, and everybody in the area down there could talk about going to the barn dances at Alonzo Carter's place. They were really big on that sort of thing. But Evan married Leslie. She was a Schreiner, and we're going to the Schreiner Cemetery next. That's where the Schrainers kind of come in. Her health was never good. Dad said whenever they were kids, if the thrashing crew was coming or something, she'd get so nervous and go to bed with a sick headache. And Pa Carter, which is what we called Evan, would have to do the cooking and stuff. And she was pretty well a mess her whole life. She died young. I think she was 55 when she died. And some of the family thinks she had early onset Alzheimer's. I have no idea what was wrong with her, but she kind of lost her mind and lost her interest in living. I only remember seeing her one time, and she was just an old, frail, white-haired woman laying in the bed down at Pa Carter's. I went in there with Dad one time to see her. Pa Carter was in there with her. And he was a live wire, full of life, but she was just terribly mentally unhealthy. And one of my cousins told me they read her death certificate, and she actually died. She starved to death. She finally got till they couldn't get her to eat. So she finally just starved to death, just went away. But in her younger day, I think she'd been quite the prize. Pa Carter was very, very happy when they were younger, I think. There's a picture I have of Dad when he came home from the service. He was home from AIT, getting ready to ship overseas, and Elwood was home. His brother was home from basic training. And there are pictures taken down to Evan and Leslie's house. She's sitting on a rug, and Dad's sitting there with her, and Dad looks so happy. And one time I was looking at that picture with Dad, and Dad said, "That's the last time my mother ever knew who I was. When I come back from the service, she never ever knew me again." So that was kind of...
Wow, that had to have been Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people think Pa Carter worked himself to death. The Carters have always been fully ambitious. And a lot of people think that Pa Carter just worked himself to death. But he actually died of stomach cancer. I've heard Dad talk about him going up to the upper farm that he rented to plow the fields and stuff. And he said at daylight, he'd get the horses and head up the road. He said he wouldn't take a bite of food with him or nothing. He said dinner time, he'd go down the creek and lay down the creek and get him a big drink of water and water the mules and rest them, the horses, rest them a little bit. And he said about dark, he said he'd come walking back down the road. Dad and Elwood done the work, so he abused himself terrible. But anyhow, he died of stomach cancer. I remember him so well. He taught me how to skip rocks. He was always happy to see us kids. I loved him. And that's the first guy close to me that ever died. And I can still remember going to school and bawling my eyes out.
How old were you?
When he died, I was, where we at, 59?
1959, and be 9 years old, 8 or 9.
I was 8. I was born in 51. Yep. But he was wonderful. And he fought in the trenches in France in World War I. Okay. Anybody knows any history knows how terrible that was. Yep. And he wanted to try to keep his boys home. He didn't want them to have to go through what he went through. So he actually got a farming deferment for Elwood. He was a couple years older than Dad, but Dad went in the service ahead of Elwood because Pa Carter held him out as long as he could have. He'd held them both out if he could have, because he knew what they were going to go do. But finally, Elwood just Pa Carter was going to wind up. Mom told me one time having to lie on the deferment papers. They were making it tougher all the time, and Elwood, I think, just joined up and got it over with. So Dad and his brother Elwood both fought in World War II. Dad was, we'll get about him in a minute, but he was a tail gunner in a B-17, and Elwood was in infantry, and Elwood was in the battle for Okinawa. Dad told me that one time. So that's the story of this sweet guy.
Different frontiers, huh?
Yep.
Huh.
Yep. Elwood wound up in the Pacific Theater, and Dad was in the European Theater.
Which Grandpa Aitchen was in Pacific too.
Yep.
All right, you're up, Jenny.
Okay. This is the grave of Martin Carter. Martin would be my great uncle. And he is the most colorful ancestor that a girl could ever have. Okay. He was a big drinker and partier. He was a bit of a rough guy. He worked for the Vincennes Bridge Company for 20 years. And he would get in with the thrashing crews when they come through here. Back then, you know, it was like a big, long trip out west. There was a big crew that come through with the machinery. And anyhow, they'd thrash wheat as it come ripe. So anyhow, of course, we're farther south. So he'd start out here with the thrashing crew when they come through and go all the way out into Montana and out in there thrashing wheat. And when that run out, then he'd hitchhike or bum his way back home. He told Dad one time that he'd slept in every fence row between here and Montana. He was the case. He carried a 45 on his side. I have several pictures of him. One time me and Dad was looking at pictures and directly Dad bust out laughing. I said, "What are you laughing about?" He said, "Look on his side." He said, "He's got a 45 pistol on his side." He said, "I forgot all about that." He said he carried that pistol all the time. He was real close to Dad. Helped Dad build the house and the barn and stuff like that whenever Dad first got married. He died in '56. I can't remember him. I was 5 years old. I can remember where he lived, but I can't remember ever seeing Uncle Martin. I probably did, but I don't recall it. Probably died of cirrhosis of the liver. He drunk a lot. The undertaker told the family that he had a liver that was hard as a rock. so I suspect so. Now he's the one that was kind of rough, and he's the one that Alonzo would send out when people didn't pay their phone bills to unhook their phone. Dad told me Uncle Martin didn't give a crap. He'd do anything he was supposed to do. He was just a really rough guy. But there's a lot of stories that are told about him. But when I was a kid and going to Sunday school here, we parked the old black 53 Chevy right over here. That was our parking spot. And for years we parked here, and finally it occurred to me, why is he buried here? The Carters are buried down there. And I said, he's buried beside a lady named Mabel Pop. Why is that? Mom said, well, because Mabel and him were lovers. And there's a bit of a scandal, which I'm not going to repeat because it doesn't need repeated. But Mabel died, and it was his wish that when he died, got buried beside Mabel. But understand, he didn't give women up. Okay, he stayed very much into women his whole life, as long as he could attract one, I guess. Whenever they opened up Montana for homesteading, he went to Montana and homesteaded. Dad laughed one time and told him, hell, he even had an Indian woman living with him when he was out there in the sod shanty. So that's the story of Uncle Martin.
Okay. And then there's a story, okay, and these two was lovers at one time.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously she made a lasting impression on him.
Yes, I'm sure she was the love of his life.
Okay. And she passed in 29, and he lived till 56.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd have been a young man at that time. She probably made quite the...
Well, he was already almost 20 years older than her. She died at 23, and when she died in 1929, he was already, add 12 years on to 29, 39. He's 40 years old, 41, whenever they had their fling.
Wow. He was my age when they was flinging.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
He'd have had to been a character.
Oh, he was a character. Yeah.
Next to the last stop on our journey today is the Schreiner Cemetery. This is where all my big heroes are. Papa Carter and Mama. Bud and Thelma Toots. Everybody know him as Bud and Toots. But to me, is Mama and Papa. I'll let Mom do the talking, because Lord knows I'm not good at that. I just rattle. But this guy and gal here has really shaped the way I live my life. Papa and Mom and Dad has really shaped the way I live my life. So, very important person to me. Both of them. All right, Mom. I never said anything. I didn't want to say much. I wanted to let you do the talking.
Okay.
This is Mom's mom and dad.
This is the last Carter stone we're going to visit today. We got a Schreiner down here, and then we got some of Mom's people, the Burtons, yet. But this is Mom and Dad, and this is our farm. Dad and Mom built this house right after they got married. Growed up in it. My niece lives in it now. And this is the barn. Dad milked cows, I believe, for 42 years. We had Holsteins. There's a big garden. Mom always raised a huge garden. Dad went, they grew up not too far from each other. And Dad was in Denver getting ready to ship overseas. I'll tell you a little funny story real quick. We just found this out here a couple of years ago. Anyhow, Mom went to Denver to see him. So I'm talking about this, thinking about it one time, talking to Mom and them. Aunt Sissy was there, Mom's baby sister. She'll tell all the dirt.
She's sassy.
She's
oh,
great.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. She's my second mom. Anyhow, Sissy's standing there, and Mom said something about being in Denver, and I said, well, wait a minute. You and Dad never got married till after the war. You weren't out there living in sin, were you? Mom puffs up right now and said, well, no, we were not. I went out there to get married. And I said, well, how come you didn't get married? She said, because one of his buddies talked him into the fact that the odds of him coming back, because he was going over on a 17 and the fatality rate was really high. But she said, he said, the odds of you coming back slim to none, and then you're leaving here a widow. Like nobody would ever marry a widow. I don't know. So Dad listens to him, and he decides not to get married. And Aunt Sissy chimes in and says, yeah, and we picked blackberries and dug ginseng to get enough money to get her a bus ticket out there. And I said, well, so how was you going to get back? She said, well, we never thought about that. She said, we're sitting in this restaurant, and Dad says, we're not going to get married. I've decided not to. My buddies talked me out of it. So Mom says, I don't know what I'm going to do. So there is a lady sitting at the table next to her, and the lady turns around and says, you need a place to stay. My husband shipped out. You can stay with me and my little girl. So then Mom...
In California?
No, Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
Yes. Then Dad shipped out, and Mom still's got to get money for a bus ticket. So as I understand it, she got a job as a waitress, I think, right there that day in that restaurant. And she worked there long enough to get a ticket, enough money to buy a bus ticket. Come back, got on another bus, went to Evansville, and she worked in the Briggs aircraft factory, all the way through the war. And she was Rosie the Riveter. You young people don't know what that is, but there's a picture of a woman with her hair all tied back, you know, with a rivet gun helping build these planes. Well, there was a blocker on the inside, somebody that was real small and athletic and can climb around. So that was Mom's job in these wings. She climbed around on the inside and held the block out so the riveter girl could make the rivet go shut. So Dad come back. Dad flew 35 missions. They lost so many planes and was having trouble keeping people trained up that they stretched them out. I think when they first started, they only flew like maybe 15 or 20 missions. But by the time Dad was there, it moved all the way up to 36 missions. But they made a mistake, and they actually only flew 35 missions. And Dad come home. He was okay. So after the war, then him and Mom got married. And this is actually Mom's home place. She was born and died on the same exact farm. So him and her went to work, milking cows and making babies. And that's about all the story there is to it. It was a great life.
Lived their whole life looking ahead and thinking of the future.
Oh, yeah.
That's what Papa was big on.
And all of us kids was pretty sure we were not going to be dairy farmers. I used to ride Dad all the time. For 42 years, the alarm went off at 5:30. Mom hopped out of bed, went in the kitchen, made coffee. Dad laid there and listened to the farm news. At 10 minutes till 6, he got out of bed, got dressed. They sat at the kitchen table and drank a cup of coffee. 10 minutes after 6 every morning for 42 years, they walked out of that house and went to the barn. And of an evening about 5 o'clock, it was the same exact thing. But I would ride him all the time about getting up so early. And now my alarm goes off at 3:45 every morning. I don't go milk cows, but I do go to the mill and go to work. So they were wonderful people. Okay, this is the gravestone of Minnie and Nat Schreiner. This is my dad's grandparents. They were born in this country. They were not immigrants, but he's the first generation born here. I'm not sure about her. His real name was Ignatius, but he went by Nats while he was here. And he contacted typhoid and was real sick with it, but was getting better. And they were taking turns setting up. Back then, you know, you kept him at home and people set up with him. He was getting better and he was dying of thirst. Typhoid's a thing that makes little holes in your intestines. And you cannot eat or drink anything while you've got it. You got to wait till that's all healed up. Really tough because they're just dying for something to drink. So he was so much better, and one of the neighbor men was setting up with him, that he gave him a drink of water, a little bit of water. And through the night he went plumb delirious, and the next morning he was dead. And he left a string of kids behind him. His oldest son was Uncle Floyd, and Uncle Floyd was 14 when he became the man of the house. And they lived on, and Minnie was kind of a selfish, into her own person, liked everybody babying her, I think. Life had been rough on her, I'm not saying it wasn't. But she married Hansford Hall first, after Nats died. And then later she married Sam Jakes.
She married twice after Nats.
Yeah. And her and Sam Jakes, a mouse, this is the story the family tells and swears it's true, but a mouse came out of a hole while they were sitting in the living room. And they got to arguing. There were two holes, and they got to arguing about which hole he come out of and which hole he went back into. They couldn't settle it. They bulled up and finally got a divorce over this mouse argument. I'm sure that was just the final thing, okay?
Yep.
Anyhow, they wound up got back together and got married for the second time. Sitting around talking about it one day, got into it again, divorced again, and then that was the end, okay? That's the kind of person she was. Now, Dad really liked her. He used to stay all night with her when he was a
kind of narcissistic, huh?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the only story that I've got on them.
Well, huh.
But they had Leslie, which was Dad's mom, the one that was mentally not right.
Okay.
So that's who these people are. Okay. This is the immigrants. This is Franz Schreiner. Of course, came from Germany, and he came here in 1851, and a lady came with him. Her name was Teresa.
That'd made him 30, even Steven.
Okay, and this lady came with him. It was Teresa Siegel. She had an illegitimate daughter, a year old, and when they got on the boat, they all had their names. She was a Siegel, he was a Schreiner. When they got off the boat, they were Schreiners. So they're assuming the two of them been married on the way. But
wow, look at all the little gravestones around.
Yep. But regardless, they had Nats, the one that we just left.
Okay.
And he was a contrary old German. And the first daughter married a Pop, if I remember right. And anyhow, this is the only family story I have on them too. He didn't like Mr. Pop. His son-in-law didn't think he had enough ambition. Thought he was lazier than a dog. So when they'd come over home to see him and his wife, the woman and the kids, I'm sure Mr. Pop never showed up. But anyhow, she'd want to send food back for him because they was so poor, and he wouldn't let her. So her daughter they'd hide food and stuff up underneath her big old dress and stuff. So when she went home, she could take a bunch of food with her. And that's about the only story that I have on Franz, okay? Amazing how some of these guys were. But he was.
Of course, stuff was a lot harder to come by at that time. So.
And you are standing on the Franz Schreiner home site. And he would have been the first grave buried here.
Wow.
Got buried right here on his home place. And all the rest of these become Schreiners and neighbors and stuff like this.
Wow.
I think next to him is one of his sons, Frederick. And I think that's probably the name Pawpaw wound up with. I think that, if I can keep myself going, Nats here named Uncle Fred. I'm sure his name was Frederick, which would have been Dad's uncle. Okay. And then Dad was named Frederick Lee Carter. Of course, everybody knew him as Bud. Nobody knew his name was even Frederick. But I always assumed that that's probably where that name came in. I don't know that. Okay. Dad didn't know.
And this would have been an immigrant too? No, this is a son.
Yep, this is a son.
So this is
American born.
American born, yep.
Yep. And he's got some of my old flowers on his grave too. We better go get him some fresh flowers. But we just trimmed out the back end of this cemetery because it was so overgrown.
Yeah,
And
it's growing over and
we
shade.
thought it was kind of a pitiful thing since it's his cemetery. So that's the story of the Schrainers.
All right.
Let me go get some flowers.
All right, so this is Mama, it's my Grandma Carter's family here, the Burtons.
Yep, the Burtons. And this is our oldest Burton buried here in Perry County, Samuel Burton.
1912.
Yep, and his wife was Eliza Miller. And Sam's Sam's grandfather was Shadrach Burton. And Shadrach Burton was born in England. He was an immigrant. He was born in England in 1775. And they came to Ohio. They wound up living in Ohio, which is where this family came from in America that drifted down this way. And Shadrach went to California during the gold rush. And the old guy was 75 years old. I figured it up.
When he went?
When he went.
Oh my
That's
God.
Right. That's right. He was 75 when he died, and they murdered him on the way back from the gold fields. Now, they went ahead and brought his body home, whoever he was traveling with, because he is buried up in Ohio. And I intend to go see that. I know what county it's in, and I know what the graveyard name is. I got it off the family records. So this guy's grandfather got killed coming back from the gold fields. Now, his father was Jeremiah Burton. And I can't tell you where Jeremiah Burton was living when this happened. But Jeremiah got attacked by an Indian. And the Indian got him down and was scalping him. And Grandma, his mom, saw it. She ran and got a gun and she killed the Indian. And then she nursed Jeremiah back to health. And my grandpa always swore that somewhere in our family is a picture of Grandma standing there holding that scalp that the Indian took, the one she killed the Indian and got his scalp back, but she didn't sew it back on his head, and Grandpa sitting there beside of her.
Wow.
But we don't know where the picture's at. Papa never could. I call my grandpa Papa. He never could locate it. But this guy is, that takes care of Shadrach Burton, Jeremiah Burton. Jeremiah Burton had Sam. Now, Sam married Eliza Miller. This is during the Civil War, and there's a set of Miller twins that were serving for the Ohio, I forgot what the company was. And one of the twins got killed, and the other one went AWOL and come home. Now, they tell the story that he went AWOL and come home for the funeral, but I'm not sure if they embalmed any of the soldiers and sent them back. I think that started happening right in there somewhere. But anyhow, when he come back, Grandpa Miller said, Elijah Miller said, I'm not sending him back. And he told Sam Burton, Sam was a young man, just married, and he said, you go down the river, the Ohio River, into the wilderness, you find a place where we can move this family to where they'll never find him. He said, get off the boat and play your guitar at these ports and make friends and talk to people. Sam Burton was a music man. So when he got down to Rome, Indiana, which is in our county, not very far from where we're standing at, they talked to him about a grist mill that had been abandoned, which is about, how far from the Burton Bridge? Half a mile? This way, about half a mile from the Burton Bridge. Anyhow, he bought it, went back in Ohio, up in Ohio. They all built flatboats, loaded up the families, and started down the river on a flatboat. When they got to the Falls of the Ohio, this is the story now that gets passed down. Grandpap tore the door, Sam tore the door off of the little shack they had built on the little raft to get out of the weather. And he strapped the baby to the door and told Louisa, stay with the door and keep it upright. And if we turn over, if you hang on to that door, you and the baby can make it. And they had a son. I don't know. I'd have to look it up to see which one it was. He said, "I'll take care of him." But they never flipped it over. They made it across the falls, okay. Huh. But they came to here, and they made their home like half mile from here. But that's the story of the Burtons. And they had Sam had John Burton, which John is right over here. John was my grandpa. He was a school teacher and a farmer, and done a lot of veterinarian work. Just a good old country gentleman. And he married Catherine Polk. That's her. They had a good life, but they kind of had a hard life. Over here is the row of graves that belongs to them. They had 5 girls. Well, they raised 5 girls. Their first child was a son that was stillborn named Russell. And their second child, I believe she was number 2, was Agnes. Now Agnes might have been second or third. But anyhow, Agnes was 3 years old. She got pneumonia and she died. And then they had a boy, which was Robert. And Robert had a back set from the measles. They called it, I believe, uranic poisoning would be my proper term, they said. But he got sick and died when he was 18. And then my Uncle Sonny got drafted. Of course, the war's pretty well over at that time. We still had troops overseas. He got killed in a training accident. So they had 3 boys and lost them all. And they kind of had a hard life. But Papa was always in a good mood and always had tons of stories to tell. He called me Pinhook, and I was crazy about the man.
He called you Pinhook,
Yeah, he called me Pinhook, yep. Yep. Spent a lot of hours sitting on his lap listening to all the old stories. That's probably where I got the love for family history. That's Uncle Sonny. He was a good-looking guy. He played the guitar. Papa played the guitar. Sam Burton played the guitar. They was all singers, had a lot of musical talent. It fell out of the basket before it got to me.
I was gonna say that's why I'm such a good singer on the YouTube videos.
What a laugh.
Everybody always comments on how good I do singing.
I bet they do. Every dog that listens to it howls,
Oh.
right? That's the story. Thank you.
Well, let's get back to work.
Let's go.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks everybody for watching. This has been the Carter side. This is my mother's side, and I don't know why. I, for some reason, didn't get the pictures of the Burton's graves or the Summers Trainer's graves. I just for some reason missed that, I guess. Next time I'm going to try to do, maybe next year I'll try to get organized and do the ancient side. There's a bunch of heroes on their side too. But this stuff we ought to take very serious, and we all ought to honor where we all come from and the history behind what made us all what we are today. That never ceases to amaze me. The sacrifices the generations has made before us never ceases to blow my mind. Love y'all. Thank you for playing along. Thank you for watching. And everybody, happy Memorial Day. Have a good one.